Vito Scaletta wasn't forced into the mafia, but he kept choosing it. Most people talk about Mafia II like it's a tragedy or some kind of, game gone wrong. Like Vito got trapped or something, like the mob destroyed his life. Like he never really had a choice, and I disagree. But if you actually pay attention, that's not really what happened. I mean, honestly, Vito had plenty of chances to walk away, and he just couldn't stand what actually feeling small and insignificant actually felt like. Here's what I mean. People remember Mafia 2 as this story about loyalty and betrayal, about the American dream going wrong, about a good guy getting corrupted by a bad system. And sure, all of that's in there, don't get me wrong, but underneath that, it's a story about a guy who would rather die dangerously than live invisible in a quiet, steady life. Because every time Vito felt small or like he didn't really matter, every time someone questioned him, every time his life went back to a normal, mundane life, he takes another risk, makes another deal, and crosses another line. And this whole video, we're going to be looking at 3 specific moments, specifically from Mafia 2, that show that Vito was actually chasing a reality that he really couldn't sustain. And why that matters, if you ever been the person everyone leans on, but nobody really gets. Alright, so my first point is when Vito comes home from the war. His family's broke, his dad's dead, his mom's working herself into the ground, and his sister looks at him like he's supposed to just fix everything. I mean, come on, give the guy a break. And, that's the first thing Vito does, right? He doesn't get a regular job. He doesn't slow down. He goes straight to his brother-in-arms, Joe, and asks, what's available? Because going legit, working a dock job and living a quiet life, being just another nobody, it really didn't feel like he was going to get anywhere, and he couldn't surrender himself to that lifestyle. So Vito didn't just join the mafia because he loved crime. He joined because being ordinary terrified him more than being this dangerous big bad man. And he'd spent his whole childhood watching his dad work himself to death for nothing, right? No respect, no recognition, and just a lot of exhaustion, being overworked, and he accumulated a lot of debt, his dad. So when Vito came back from the war, he made a choice. He'd rather take risk than just disappear into the same life his father had. And maybe not entirely, but you probably felt some version of this to an extent. Maybe you grew up watching someone grind every day and literally get nowhere, and you're probably doing that now. And you swore you'd be different. You'd be the one who made it, the one people remembered and made a mark, on the world. So you say yes to things that scared you, took on more than you could carry, worked yourself past exhaustion because the alternative was being average, being forgotten, or feeling worse than broken. And here's the thing, people probably praised you for it, called you ambitious, driven, a go-getter. But underneath, you weren't really chasing success, you were running from just being invisible. And Vito is just the person who would honestly really get that. And Joe's is Vito's best friend. He's that guy who got him into this life, and if you watch their scenes closely, there's a pattern here. Joe suggests something risky, Vito hesitates for about 5 seconds or so, and then he just says fuck it, he goes along with it. And it really isn't because Joe's forcing him. Nobody's forcing Vito's hands, because saying no would mean admitting that he's scared, that he's not up to the task, and Vito can't really afford to look weak, not to Joe and definitely not to the mafia. There's a scene where Joe's setting up a deal that clearly goes really bad, and you can see it on Vito's face. He knows, but he doesn't walk away, because walking away would mean being the guy who couldn't handle it. And Vito's entire sense of worth is tied to being useful. And you see this all throughout the game, being reliable, being the guy who can handle whatever gets thrown at him. So every time he has a chance to step back, to protect himself, and to make a rational decision to say, this is a lot, this is too much, he just doubles down instead, because usefulness is the only currency that he knows. And maybe you're that person in your family, the one who calls when things fall apart, the one who shows up, handles it, never complains. And people love you for it. They say things like, I don't know what I'd do without you, or you're really strong, But here's kind of my point. What they don't see is they don't see you not knowing how to stop. Because if you're not useful, if you're not the one solving problems, who even are you? You built up your entire identity around being needed. And now you're terrified of what happens if you ever admit you can't carry everything by yourself. So, just like Vito, keep saying yes, you keep taking on more, and keep proving your worth around being kept. And I'm not gonna spoil the ending for the people who haven't played it or don't know, but I will say this. By the time the credits roll, Vito's lost almost everything, and the crazy part is he had the chances, or plenty of chances, to stop multiple times. People warned him, people offered him an out, so to speak, but he couldn't just take them, because taking that out meant admitting he'd been wrong, that all the risk, all the sacrifices, all the lines he crossed didn't make him somebody. That just made him useful to people who didn't actually really care about him. They used him as a tool, used him as somebody who was expendable. And Vito's tragedy isn't that the Mafia or the things that he did ruined his life, it's that he kept choosing the Mafia because the alternative, which was being nobody or similar to his father, might as well have been death itself. And by the time he realizes what he'd actually been chasing, it was too late to get any of that back. And this is the part that's hard to say out loud. Some of us don't ruin our lives, I should say, because we're weak. We ruin them because we can't stop proving ourselves. You take that job that pays more but costs you your peace every day. You stay in the relationship because leaving would mean admitting you were wrong. You keep showing up for people who drain you because at least they need you. And the whole time you tell yourself it's loyalty, it's responsibility, it's strength. Yeah, okay. But really, you're just terrified of being ordinary or not mattering. Maybe even disappearing into a life that doesn't feel significant. And I get it. Trust me, I've been there. So you keep choosing the hard things, the risky things, and the thing that hurts, because at least it makes you feel like you're somebody, Vito Scaletta spent his whole life trying to matter. And he did. To the wrong people, though. And honestly, for the wrong reasons and at the wrong cost. He wasn't trapped. He just kept making the same choice over and over because he couldn't stand the alternative. And I think a lot of us do some version of that. We build our lives around being useful, being needed, being the one who handles things, and we call it strength, but really, we're just scared of what we'd be if we ever stopped. So, here's my question for you, to those who did get to the end of the video. What are you still choosing even though it's costing you? Because walking away would feel like admitting you don't matter. Drop it in the comments, and let's talk about it. And if this video hits different, subscribe. I have a lot more coming.